Okay, and we are back again, ladies and gentlemen. What's going on? Hope you're having a wonderful day. The time has come. I am outside of the theater. You can see it right over there. I'm going to see the Fantastic Four, The First Steps, Marvel Cinematic, First Family in the MCU, First Family in the Marvel Comics, Pedro, Vanessa, Ebon, Joseph, Galactus, Silver Surfer, you name it, Matt Shakman. I'm excited, y'all. I am excited to see... Really hyped. If you can't tell, I have had such an interesting relationship with this film. They announced it 3 or 4 years ago with John Watts directing. Was not excited for that. Matt Shakman in the mix. Excited for that. Cast. It's like, oh, I like these people individually, but how are they going to come together? First trailer, I was a little lukewarm, but if you've been following my channel the last month and a half, trailers, teasers, clips, behind the scenes, I've been consuming it like Galactus, and I've been really on board with this cast. I'm really excited for this aesthetic, this 60s futuristic vibe. I'm excited to know that this doesn't come with, even though I'm a Marvel fan, I've seen all the movies, all the shows, no homework required. We're in another universe, another timeline, other world. That's exciting. That's exciting to me. So I'm hopeful. Predictions. I think my favorite member of the crew will be Joseph Quinn's Johnny Storm, followed by The Thing. But I hope to love them all. But I think that's going to be my favorite two characters. I predict Galactus is going to be awesome. I know everybody's been saying it looks visually pleasing. That doesn't surprise me because I know Matt Shakman, his cinematographers are going to bring their A game. I already love the score of Michael Giacchino. And I think Silver Surfer is going to be a scene stealer. And I think I'm going to hopefully really enjoy this. What do you all think? Put your predictions of what you think I'm going to think when I come back and see you guys in a couple of seconds. But fingers crossed, man. Very stoked. Hopefully we got something good, and hopefully Marvel's back, baby. I'm so tired of that, but we will be talking about what I thought of the film on the other side.
Oh, guys, Marvel just can't get it right, man. It's just sad.
I'm joking, guys. We are back. Just got done seeing the Fantastic Four, and I'm going to say I enjoyed it for the most part. Now, before we get into my full thoughts, which will be spoiler-free, do all the YouTube stuff for your boy. That's a like, a share, leave us some comments, consider subscribing. I would appreciate it. Speaking of appreciation, it's been 4 Fantastic Four movies, and for the better part of a 30-year run, it's been pretty unfantastic, to say the least. Obviously, there's not a lot of comparison to those 4 films versus this, but this is clearly the best Fantastic Four that we've ever gotten thus far. I will say, positively speaking, I want to start off with Matt Shakman, who I've been a fan of even prior to WandaVision. He's done stuff. One of my favorite shows ever is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's directed over 40-plus episodes of that. Game of Thrones, Succession, the list goes on and on and on. But again, a lot of you all probably know Matt for his work with WandaVision. And what I loved about what he did with WandaVision, besides, Jack Schaefer's writing, but the visual flair, the personality, the aesthetic that he comes with, the eye, the detail that he comes with, Matt Shakman was cooking. I'm glad Marvel allowed someone with his sensibilities, and no disrespect to John Watts, who, made the most money for any Spider-Man in the franchise. But those films, to me, didn't have a personality. Matt Shakman has a sensibility. He has a style, and he really brings it in his film. I thought he did a really good job of directing this. This is a lot to do. Marvel's First Family, Galactus, Silver Surfer, another Earth that we're on. It's a lot that he had to tackle, and I think for the most part, he stuck the landing. Sticking with the production of this film, I know a lot of people have been saying this is like one of the better-looking films of Marvel. I agree with that sentiment. I don't think it is the best. I still think Guardians Volume 2 is probably one of the better-looking, Black Panther's up there, Thor Ragnarok's up there. But as, not going over a list, but this is definitely one of the better-looking films, especially with the recent, the Marvels, Love and Thunder, Multiverse of Madness. There's been some, and even the TV shows, they haven't looked that great. Now, granted, some of those were shot during the pandemic and shot on green screen. There's restrictions, yada, yada, yada. This is a really well-produced Marvel film. Again, I've been saying it for years now. Kevin Feige has been waiting and itching for this moment to get the Fantastic Four right and get the X-Men with his vision right. And you can tell there's a care, there's an attention to detail, there is an effort. and no disrespect to those other movies, but you can tell when Marvel puts effort into how their films look. And this is a really well-produced film. Not to give scenes away, If you all have been following my channel for a while, horror and science fiction are my two genres. This was a lot of science fiction that I was eating up like a kid at the candy store. But there's, going back to this visual flair, there's a sequence that takes place in space that I was just in awe. Beautiful looking film. Michael Giacchino's score. I have my low keys. I have my Black Panthers. I have my original Avengers. But the score that Michael Giacchino is cooking in this film, I'm a big fan of the score. I love the composition of the score. It just adds to that awe of being a superhero and being in the times that this film is replicating of the retro, futuristic 60s vibe. It just has that essence. I love the score. So production, direction, look beautiful, sounds great, performances. When they announced, you guys remember, there was Emma Stone, Margot Robbie, Adam Driver. The list went on from all the different people they were thinking about casting. I was nervous when they announced Joseph, Pedro, Vanessa, Ebon. I'm a fan of all of them individually, but I didn't know if they can come together as a group, as a family, and make it believable. I was proven wrong. The goal of this movie was to make you care for the Fantastic Four, and I think it did that plus some. Individually speaking, I'm a big Vanessa Kirby fan. She carries a lot of the emotional weight in this film and does it in a way that is appreciative. We've had Marvel mothers in the MCU, more going back to WandaVision, obviously Wanda, but there you feel the mother's love and what a mother would do to protect her family. I thought Vanessa was great, and really, I feel like she carried a lot of the emotional weight, the heart of the group. Pedro, I lean more positive than negative. There's still something off about the performance, but I will say I'm not a big Fantastic Four comic book reader. I've watched some of the animated stuff. I've seen their runs when they pop in and out of the certain comic runs, but never a big fan. But I do love what Reed Richards represents in the Marvel Cinematic, not even the universe, but just Marvel in general. This scientist whose gift and a curse is his intelligence and how he battles within himself of like thinking with his heart versus thinking with logic, science versus emotion, this, that, and the other. I think Pedro really captures that really well in this film. But I said there's just some things, some moments, I'm just like, didn't entirely work. But for the most part, I thought Pedro did a really good job as Reed Richards. I'm really excited to see the evolution of this character from the groundwork that they laid here. I said in my pre-recording that I had a feeling that Ben, and as the thing, Ebon and Joseph were going to be my standouts, and that was the case. The brotherly back and forth bond that they have, big brother, little brother energy is fantastic, pun intended. Joseph Quinn, out of the four, besides Pedro, I was nervous about him because obviously 2022 was his coming out party, right? Stranger Things, and then he was just in, Gladiator 2 and Quiet Place, and he's going to be in the Beatles. Like this guy, they want Joseph to be that guy, very similar to Pedro. And he delivered, man. I really liked his Johnny Storm. And what I loved about his Johnny Storm, and I love Chris Evans in the role, and what I loved about this version character, I think some of the previous iterations of these characters in live action have forgotten that these are scientists that are astronauts, and they're pretty damn smart. So I like that they allowed Johnny to, he's a, kind of the young buck of the crew, the wild card, if you want to call him that, but he's also a smart man. I like the little side plot they give Johnny to show that intellect, right? I thought he was great. I thought Ben was really good. I really liked the thing. My only issue, and I'll talk about a little bit later, is out of the four, he doesn't get as much fleshing out. But I thought the look, the feel, if Sue's the heart, he is the the blood around the heart. I don't know. He's a foundational pillar of this family, and his role and his position in this family, his leadership when needed be, is really, really well done. And I'm really excited to see more of the things. I was really impressed by how they use them, minus exploring more of the character in regards to the trauma of the transformation. So the crew worked. The villains looked cool as hell. Galactus, the scope, the scale, which I'll talk a little bit about in the negatives later, but compared to the crappy cloud version of Galactus we saw years ago, this is a huge improvement, but also the voice. Ralph Ineson, his voice is just fantastic. I don't know how many times I'm going to say fantastic. Take a shot at home. Great menacing voice. Silver Surfer, and this goes back to that scene I was talking about earlier of her, how she's using this film. The surfboard, the surfing on, and this isn't a spoiler, this is in the trailer, the surfing on a black hole blew my mind. Like, I love how they use Silver Surfer in this film when those moments happen. So they look very cool, but there is some shortcomings of the villain. But again, visually they were cool. And there's also, I don't want to give too much away, but there's also some, if you know Fantastic Four, some other characters that are known in their rogues gallery that was pretty fun to see in this film, and how they use them was interesting. And I will say, and this isn't to make it a Marvel versus DC conversation, but it is nice to see following Superman into this, getting back to the comic book essence of these characters, right? We've lived in a time for a little bit where it's like, we're going to get grounded and gritty and make it realistic, with the comic book genre, which works for certain characters. But Superman and this embrace the comic book elements. The very, these are the Beatles in their universe. And I love how they're portrayed in this universe and how they're used and how they're viewed as actual superheroes. Which, speaking of superheroes, I know the big talk around town in the last 4 or 5 years is there superhero fatigue? Which I do think there is to a certain extent. But to my point, this does not require any homework. If you are someone that's maybe been checked out of Marvel for the last few years, or maybe in and out of Marvel, or maybe never even jumped on a train, you don't have to have any knowledge of any previous Marvel films or TV shows to enjoy this film, which I think is a positive. I think we need to, I love my world building. I love my universe tie-ins and what have you, but it is refreshing to not have to be beholden to what came before and what's coming after, whatnot, even though this does kind of open a door for the future. But nonetheless, this was a standalone story that stands on its own, that doesn't need any other projects to boost it up or to understand what's going on. So I will give Marvel their props for that. I really enjoyed that element. Even though I've seen all the shows, I've seen all the movies, I can follow along what's going on. But again, for those that might not be in the trenches of the MCU, you're going to be fine with this one. I talked about the production, which again, I thought it was immaculate. I guess I want to talk about that a little bit further. The aesthetic, man, of the retro futuristic 60s Jetsons vibe really worked for me, man. It added that charm that I was talking about earlier with the comic booky element. Another thing I wanted to talk about was, from a positive, I will say I liked, and this is going back to Superman, how Superman, just, if you haven't seen it, but that film threw you right into the mix. Metahumans, 300 years, yada, yada, yada. This does a similar thing where, this isn't a spoiler, very early on, I think it's already been publicly said that the Fantastic Four has been the group for the last 4 years. They're throwing us into the mix. We get a little bit of their origins. I like how they just kind of throw us into it, and, we'll catch up with the characters as the story unfolds. And I will say, from a narrative perspective, I like the focus on the characters. This is much more, I guess some people might be disappointed, this might be a negative for some, but I liked it. This is much more of a character study, a character-driven narrative, more so than action focused, than, the big spectacle focus. It has those moments, but it is very much so a character-focused narrative, which I appreciate. Let's talk about some criticism. I've kind of hinted at it every now and then, but let's just get it out. Going back to my villains, Galactus, Silver Surfer. Very cool. Love seeing them on the big screen. But I feel like there was just a lot left to be desired. From a narrative perspective, from a character development perspective. I've said it a billion times on this channel. I think Marvel has a huge power scaling issue. And I'm referring to Galactus at this point, especially in the third act. I'm just like, come on, guys. This is a cosmic god. And the way that they handle Galactus at points was a little bit disappointing for me. Same with Silver Surfer. They give her a very cool look. They give her a very cool scenes. They give us a bite at the backstory, but they're not enough. So I definitely prefer Silver Surfer over Galactus from like a character perspective, but they were not as bad as like phase 1, phase 2 villains, but still there was some, Marvel has always said that their main goal is to make sure that you love superheroes. And in return, sometimes they forget about their villains. And I feel like this is not as bad as some of their examples, but kind of in the middle as far as what I would like to see from these characters. I think it's pretty public, but just in case you guys have stayed away from trailers and teasers and whatnot, there is a MacGuffin in this film that took away some of my enjoyment from the movie from a visual standpoint. A CGI. I don't want to say what it is, but you guys know at this point. I don't want to spoil it though. There's a MacGuffin that didn't look that great. It took me out of some scenes, but also just, I know the MacGuffin and what they're capable of. I don't know, and this is going back to that Marvel homework. You don't have to see anything to understand it, but you have to know who this MacGuffin is. And I don't know if they handled it that well. And plus, I just don't like how much the film relies on this MacGuffin, especially with it being the first film. It didn't entirely work for me, that particular portion of the film. Pacing, I like that we are at a point now where, not every story needs 2.5 hours, 3 hours to tell its narrative. Some stories, I feel like this film could have added another 15, 20 minutes to give Ben some more backstory, because there is allusions to who he is, what he's become, that they barely scratch the surface on. Natasha Lyonne, who's in this film, I love her as an actress, they barely touch on that. So like I said earlier, Ben gets the short end of the stick as far as getting him something to do in this film. Like, he gets the least to do. And I think that boils down to, if you fleshed out another 10, 15, maybe even 20 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes for a Fantastic Four, I think that's fine. But I do think they were some shortcomings because of the runtime, which also, I mentioned the third act. I don't know, man. And I think about WandaVision, that excellent show, but that finale didn't work for me. And the finale with this one didn't work for me because, again, the Galactus of it all, the MacGuffin of it all, the look of it all, and how things just kind of sped up. And also, this goes back to the MacGuffin and how this is only 2 hours. There's this idea of how we're going to set up Galactus that just, things went too fast for me. And I think that goes to the fact that, again, it's only 2 hours that they had to work with. So those are things that stood out to me that kind of left me like, man, if they would have just spread the wealth for the characters and the development and maybe not rely so heavily on this MacGuffin, it would have been even more of a fantastic film for me. But as you all can tell, I'm leaning more towards the positives than the negatives. So before we wrap up, I will say there are 2 post-credit scenes. I'm going to give the first mid-credit scene a B as far as grade, because of the implications of what it can mean and what it leads into. I'm going to give the post-credit scene a C-, because it's one of those like Superman things. And again, I'm glad that Marvel isn't so reliant on like you have to have something earth-shattering for the post-credits. But I will give the last one didn't do anything for me. But the mid-credit, we'll talk about that in another day, another video. But overall, man, I think this is, in the pun intended, a step in the right direction for Marvel. Again, if their goal was we need you to care for these characters, because in the next 5 to 7 years, Fantastic Four, X-Men is our crown jewels. We need you to like these characters, love these characters, care for these characters. And as I am speaking to you all right now, it accomplished that goal. I'm excited to see more of them as a family, but also, how they're going to mix into the greater MCU and Doomsday and Secret Wars. So I think if that was the goal, they accomplished it. I mentioned my shortcomings, but I feel more confident about how I feel about this film and giving it a 3.5 out of 5. Now, just in case you're wondering, if you are that Marvel versus DC camp, and I think both of these studios benefit from each other doing well. But if you were to say, Elliot, which film did you enjoy more, Superman or Fantastic Four? Just for shits and giggles, for the hell of it, I personally enjoy Fantastic Four more than I did Superman, but not by a lot. I think the biggest takeaway from that conversation that we're having, what a time to be alive, that we have a good DC film and a good Marvel film at the same time. We're winning. We're eating good. Hopefully this is the future to come. Marvel and DC making good films at the same time. So that's my thoughts on the Fantastic Four. 3.5 out of 5. I love these characters, and I'm excited to see them again. So that is my thoughts, y'all. You don't know because you're obviously at home or watching. It is hot in this car. I can't turn my air on because it messes up the sound quality. So I'm doing this for y'all. So do me a favor. Hit the like button. Share this video. More importantly, share your thoughts on the film once you've seen it. I'll probably put this out sometime on Thursday. So let me know what you thought of the film. Where does this rank amongst the other MCU films for you? Which character did you enjoy the most? What did you think about the film? Pros and cons. Let's talk in the comments. And as always, man, if this is your first time watching one of my videos, I appreciate you. Consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. For those that are subscribed and continue to be subscribed, I appreciate y'all. Y'all be safe. Stay cool. And I'll see you all on the next video.